Today, we'll talk about advanced level trading setups. I'll show you multiple inducements and double optimal trade entry with order block secrets. Then I'll explain how you can look for sniper scalping trades for high profits like a pro trader. We have so much to cover. If you're ready, let's start. Welcome our free trading course, all about price action trading strategies and smart money concepts. Today we'll talk about advanced level trading. If you are looking for a structured table of contents, I set it up for you. You can find it on Google Drive or directly from my website, which is in the description. Okay people, let's get back to Bitcoin. After each significant reaction point in high time frames, Bitcoin starts to create micro ranges. Check this liquidity sweep. What happens after it? Price consolidates and accumulates new orders. Another liquidity sweep in a daily chart. Go and open 15-minute time frame and watch the range. And this keeps going and going, as you can see. So, as for day traders and scalpers like us, this is a golden opportunity because ranges are heaven for trading opportunities. It gives us bias and trading possibilities. Let's see the latest range and how we traded last week. Let's check this 1 hour chart. If you follow me on Twitter, I've been following this range for a long time. I post charts and critical reaction points on Twitter. This was the main range that I was following in March. It was heaven for us. We kept trading this range. The price deviated in the range low. Right after the significant equal lows, I was expecting a rally upwards. But why? Reason 1. Price swept the equal lows and filled up. Reason 2. Deviation at range low. Very cheap prices below the discount level. Okay, all great, but all these equal lows, ranges, inducement, and so on are meaningless stuff for me. I do not care at all. I care for the future. Where can the price go? Is there a reason to go up? Remember, if you do not have goals in life, if you do not have targets to achieve in life, you will not achieve anything. Without a target, there is no success. This is the philosophy of life. So the large imbalance above and the significant downtrend liquidity was my bias. So basically we are going to check two trades, New York opening scalps. First, let us focus on this range low deviation area with a close look. Okay, checking the 15-minute chart now. What do we have here? First of all, I'm not concerned with the swing low because it is the equal lows hunt from the hourly chart or inducement. I look at this chart and I ask myself, where can the price go? Any reason to go up? This large imbalance and basic downtrend liquidity were my main great targets for the price to reach. Furthermore, check this equal lows hunt right before the New York opening. So what is this? First, 1 hour external equal lows hunt. Second, 15 minutes internal equal lows hunt. This is a double inducement. Now, switch to 2 minutes chart. I do not select 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 minute time frames. I just go through them and find the clearest time frame with imbalances. Notice this strong market structure shift at this point, which creates our overall demand area, which is the breaker block. Do not force yourself on extreme precision here. Then pointing out my imbalances one by one, checking out possible entry points. I think this imbalance, breaker block, and little pre-market inducement were enough here. And I place my entry. Along the way, price hunts these newly formed equal highs and carry my position to 1 hour profit. There is a dilemma here. An early equal highs here create a reverse micro inducement that may push the price down at the micro level. If the price cannot push itself up here at once, the price may reverse for a while, and it happens. I close this position at just under 1 hour profit, better than nothing. Okay, Let's continue watching the price again. Price pulls back to deep discount levels in this micro time frame until the deepest imbalance. Now notice that another equal loss hunt is happening right at this point. So what is this? 1 hour equal loss hunted, 15 minutes equal loss hunted, and now 2 minutes equal loss hunted. Triple inducement in 3 different time frames. This is a multi-level inducement. This is the core of sniper scalping. Okay, let's go back to our tiny scalps. But still, this is master level trading, which I'll talk about in the master class. Now at this point, what happens is a simple action. Price hunts equal lows and fills imbalances. Now another secret here, order blocks. Equal lows, imbalances, and order blocks all combined are just rockets. Let me say again, rockets. Better than Elon Musk's SpaceX rockets. If you draw your OTE levels, you'll notice that it also collides with the optimal trade entry zone. In my opinion, all this is enough to enter a trade here at this point. But check what else is happening here. Micro level break, pullback, and imbalance. Okay, this is the most ideal trade that you can enter in your life. Let's see a 15-minute chart again. Look at this, how it hunts the downtrend liquidity and fills the imbalance. Now check this 1 hour chart. Check your entry point and how it starts the mega rally. Why? Because of triple inducement. 1 hour equal loss hunted, 15 minutes equal loss hunted, 2 minutes equal loss hunted. This is maximum level advanced trading. Now, let's talk about this chart, another New York opening trade practice. Go back and open 1 hour time frame. You'll notice the price has so much liquidity left on the range high area. So basically, this is a reverse trade idea. If the price wants to fall, it needs fill first, which requires mostly liquidity hunt. See this break happening in 5-minute time frame, and the mega imbalance it left behind, and the general demand area with a reaction. I posted this chart before happening on Twitter. Notice this little inducement point right before the New York opening, and the gathered micro liquidity above. Price have a purpose here. It is obvious. Now check this OTE. Today we will also look at OTE inside OTE, trading double optimal trade entries. Now switching to 2-minute chart here. Notice this micro equal lows gathered here. Also our pre-market inducement area stays the same. Okay, here at the OTE level, what happens? Price fully fills the 5-minute imbalance on the right. Gets down to the 5-minute demand area. It clears the pre-market inducement. It clears the micro equal lows. Price is all filled up right here. Now see this wick break? Yes, it is a wick break, but it happens in a very significant reaction point. This is when you can use wick breaks because it has a meaning. It has a story behind it. Price deepens here, comes back at this tiny imbalance and the order block area. Now draw another OTE. Okay, what is this? This style is called double OTE. Finding a micro low time frame OTE inside macro high time frame OTE. Can you keep up with me? I hope your brain is not on fire yet. Sorry, but this is trading. You asked me how I can become a pro trader. And this is the way. This is the way, like in the Mandalorian. And this is your entry. But this trade had one problem. Time. Even though this is a sniper trade, it took around 8 hours to be completed. This is the reality of trading. Some days your trade may take 10 minutes to complete, and some other days it can take hours. You need to accept this reality. Okay folks, ending this great lecture, learned about superior level trading concepts. Probably next week we will look into more trading examples. I hope you subscribe to the channel and like the video. Thank you, please take care and see you soon.